I wouldn't be opposed to having a second wife either. My husband is wealthy, so I wouldn't be opposed to it. Honestly, I do need help to clean the house and take care of the chores, so I wouldn't be
And
opposed to it.
They think, oh, you see other cultures, they have multiple women, but they're not thinking it's not about just giving them the sex, which is the part that she mentioned. It's about providing. And it's like, if this first wife has a house, you can provide another house for the other one. Then you can't, most men in our society cannot support not even one on their own.
Mm,
That's the
Hey,
yeah.
reality.
what do you think, Amir? Do you agree with Hattie, or do you have a different perspective?
I mean, he has his views. Islamically, it is a pillar of our religion. Marriage is a pillar of our religion. So you cannot complete your religion if you're not married, if you don't get married. So, and
You
the
said you
reason
can't.
about the
It's not completed.
you cannot complete your religion
So you're
without
not
being
like a
married.
full Muslim if you're.
Marriage is almost 50% of our religion. We consider it very heavy in our religion. So yes, and as for arranged marriage, my marriage was arranged. So yes,
Was it?
and we also don't believe in same-sex marriage. I mean, that's a no-no for us as well.
course.
Um, as for having multiple wives, it's uncommon today, but the reason why that was allowed back in the day was because we were living in times of war, and a lot of men died in battle, and a lot of women, because women were not allowed to work, women were a lot of times not uneducated because they couldn't be educated, but a lot of women just were taking care of the family. And so they had no way of making money. So we believed that it was part of your duty as a man that if you could afford more than one wife, that you take another in. And if she has children, then you bring in the children of her as well. So it was
So
seen
it
as
was more for like to care for the women that didn't have their husbands to come back.
correct, correct. And in
Not
times
necessarily
of now,
necessary now.
it's not
It's
necessary.
far,
And this is where,
far
and
out.
this is where this is where a lot of times people, especially like Americans and Westerners, they get it confused and they start thinking like, oh, oh, Muslim, you have four wives, and they think about the sexual aspect of marriage when thinking about having, forgive my language, but like orgies and so on. That's not what it is. It's not about sexual. It's about providing and creating, caring for women that needed the help, needed the assistance. So it wasn't seen as it is today. As for a rich man and having multiple wives, if you can afford her, in the Quran it says if you can afford her, you must treat her equally. Every wife must be treated equally. And if you can afford that, then so be it. I don't know about, the rest of the people having all these wives just because they have money. I wouldn't be opposed to having a second wife either. My husband is wealthy, so I wouldn't be opposed to it. Honestly, I do need help to clean the house and take care of the chores, so I wouldn't be
And
opposed to it.
that's what I was gonna ask you. How do the women feel? Are they okay with it, or do they feel like, oh my God, after I invested all this time in you, you're gonna pick a second wife or third or fourth? Like, how do they feel?
Men do not take on a second wife without typically being okay with the first one, the first wife being okay with it. It's not typical that you'll see a man just bring home a woman and say, "Hi, first wife, deal with it." That's not
Hmm.
typically what happens. Usually there is a discussion, woman approves, and the second wife is brought on board. Um, Women in this case, typically, because we're more thinking about family, the children, the legacy, we're not typically thinking about the sexual aspect and jealousy. So, of course,
Hmm.
jealousy can occur, but the majority of the time, we're thinking about bringing in more children, having a larger family unit. And Arabs, we love big families. We love big family dinners. We love
Oh
Ramadan, like
yeah.
when Ramadan comes, we love children everywhere and, women and everything. We love it.
The
Yeah,
So,
Eid,
especially
right?
summer.
That's like the big party after Ramadan.
right, right. We have Eid, and it's beautiful. So this is what we believe in, and we always have to thank our God. We thank Allah for giving us big families and lots of children and being abundant. So yes. So I mean, those are the views Islamically on marriage. My views personally, no, those are a little bit more controversial. I,
What?
You know what? If I may,
No.
if I
Feel
may
free.
say something real quick, I love her perspective because that makes you really think about how people misunderstand or kind of like they take whatever day it's convenient for them for other cultures, because they think, oh, you see other cultures, they have multiple women, but they're not thinking it's not about just giving them the sex, which is the part that she mentioned. It's about providing. And it's like, if this first wife has a house, you can provide another house for the other one, then you can't, most men in our society cannot support not even one on their own. That's the
Hey,
Right.
reality. That's
hey,
the
with
reality.
inflation coming up, I mean, shit. I mean, yeah, you're definitely right. You have to be a millionaire nowadays to be able to have
Exactly.
a
But
stable family.
even as a millionaire, it's not just about being able to pay for that person. It's not, because you're not just paying for it because the mentality is different. Like I'm saying, I really
I was
like the
just
part
talking
that
about.
man is just confused and understanding the way that they want it because it's beneficial for them. So they just interpret the message on how it's convenient for them.
I'm not gonna lie, men as a whole are very corrupt species. So all we think about is just the sex and all of that, and everything to follow through, right? But Amira is very right on that perspective of like the women and so forth. So we thank you for fixing that on my end, which I really appreciate. So I feel really bad for giving you
So
wrong information.
I have a story because I do like how you just explained it. It is a different perspective because I dated a Muslim man and he was one like you said, they have big families. He was one of 8 children. He was the oldest, and all of his brothers. I think he had 7 brothers. No, he had 5 brothers, and then he there was a sister in there, but all of his brothers had multiple wives, and this is in today's time. Like, his son passed away, and there was a funeral, and all of the brothers came to the funeral, and they all brought between 2 to 4 women, every single brother. So I was asking the women like questions, are so how does this work? Is everything like are you guys all are you chummy? Like, are you all in the same house? And some of them lived in 2 separate homes, and the guy would kind of like split time and go between them. Some of them lived in the same home, but I was just curious about the dynamic. And one of the wives, she was the only wife for like 28 years, and then he decided on the 28th year of their marriage that he wanted a second wife, and she wasn't okay with it. But she ended up just agreeing to it because she wanted to please her husband. But she didn't like it, and neither did the second wife like it. So that's kind of, and she and I were pretty close. So that's kind of the conversation I had with her. She was really unhappy with it. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on being okay with it versus her perspective. She was like,
Having guys having multiple wives is very uncommon nowadays. Just as in to meet
and
them.
this was here in Florida.
No,
So
I
like,
understand it. Just saying, like for you to meet a man to have multiple wives, it's very uncommon. Like like I can go to Dubai right now. I won't see another man with like 2 wives that I know of, or regardless of my friends. That's why it's like very uncommon right now, unless it's like very rich or like the leaders of the country or so forth, or someone that can provide.
There
Um,
was a saying by the prophet. He said that yes, 4 is permissible, but 1 is best for you if you only knew. So yeah,
preference is 1, but
right.
it's okay
He
if you
says
need to.
he says that 1 is best for you if you only knew, but 4 is permissible. So
This is from the Quran.
this is from the prophet. He said that.
And then, funny, I asked the gentleman I was dating, I asked his mother, I said, so you don't have, your husband doesn't have multiple wives, and she was like, yeah, I'm not okay with it. And he knows that. I never agree to it. I will never agree to it. And I said, well, how come your sons? She said, it was for times of war, kind of like what you just explained. And she
Right.
wasn't okay with it. So I guess he never took on a second wife because she would not be okay with it. So the wife has to agree.
Doesn't
mean,
have to, but
Doesn't have
it's
to.
respectful with a man who doesn't want a lot of fighting in the home. Of course, no man wants to come home to drama and fighting and unhappy women. So typically, there has to be an agreement. I don't know very many men that just go against the wishes of their wives and just say, I'm bringing home, or no matter if you like it or not. It can happen. It can happen.
Yeah.
It's not against. There's no rule that says if your first wife doesn't agree, you can't have it. No, you can do it, but it's not typical that you'll see that.
And you said you would be okay with it?
I would.
You would? Has he like if he asked, or you would have to bring it up?
He doesn't want it. He says
No.
that he has enough on his hands. He doesn't need it. So I said,
okay. And you're like, I need somebody to help me clean.
I like that her perspective was like, hey, I wouldn't mind. Like, shit. Hey, do you know how many guys would love that from a wife?
What about
I don't
you,
know.
Leilani? How is marriage viewed in your culture?
I'll first talk about the marriage growing up, what we were raised in, and then I'll tell you about the marriage now.
Okay.
And the one I have with my wonderful husband. So,
because you're married and Amira's married. I think you're the only two married on the panel.
yeah, maybe y'all aren't married yet. One day. It's great. I think what's great is I love how authentic everybody is on here about their views on marriage, and also just being real, being single, and this just processing the values behind it. So my mother was Muslim when she met my dad, who was raised Catholic. My mom was raised in a Catholic school, but when she was married before. She had a first marriage, and in that first marriage, she was married young, probably like 19, and her first husband was a womanizer. So I think there's, I was hearing the traditional. I know there's different types of Muslim upbringing, marriage beliefs that everyone may have, and then it's just the person, depending on how they want to. I heard Heidi also saying how it was with, there's the average people, what they have with their beliefs, how they come into response to God. It's like, we have some people that are very extreme and some are not, and however they design their lifestyle around it, it affects the way that they value women and men, and that affects marriage. Sometimes we just have to see what it is that works. And so what happened with my mother was she was with a man who had more than one wife, and he was a womanizer too. So she had my sister, and then my mother, they got divorced, and my mom ended up coming to the States, being with her sister, and that's how they met my dad. And my dad saw my mother and said, "I'm going to marry her." He just didn't care if she was Muslim. He didn't care. He just loved her. He said, "I just know that I'm going to marry her." And my mother, who wanted to honor and respect my mom's family, she asked my grandmother and said, how do you feel if I marry this man who isn't a Muslim? He, and she said, well, I see how much he really loves you, and it's okay. And she actually said it was okay. So they got married within 3 months, and, they had to come to a common ground with marriage. I mean, I think the love surpassed all the differences there for them. And, Catholic tradition there's a little structure there, and a Muslim faith, there is some there too. So there's this, they're both agreed with having reverence to God. I think sometimes with the Muslim faith, my mom was doing a lot of the Quran, the 5 times a day, and she was seeking. She had some questions because she couldn't understand why, she had to kind of figure out what was going to fit for her in response to the marriage. Now, the one thing that my mother was very strict on, the one thing that was what my mother was very strict on was she really wanted as a woman to be respected, and Muslim faith too was really big on the purity. I mean, she would always really be big on us being respected by men and making sure we were honoring our family, because when she converted, she was disowned by the family after she converted to being a Christian. So but over time they worked it out and still were able to talk. And so my father's side of marriage, where her and my father, they both came together on, was they both wanted the marriage to work. So I think there comes a place in marriage where, regardless of whatever religion there is what do people want the marriage to be? It's like, my background's in the counseling field, and I used to counsel married couples. And one thing that we used to say to people is you have, like, picture your marriage like a gold brick, and if you were to have a gold brick together, what would you want to make it out of? Would you want to do, like, would you want to make jewelry out of a gold brick? What would you? So I kind of was raised in seeing marriage being different for out of two different religions, and they were coming together and raising four children. And then when I got married to my husband, my kind of encouraging word to Hadi is that my husband was praying for a wife, and I was praying for the husband, and we both had a checklist. And I don't know, God just put it together, and it just clicked. Um, but and Shana knows the whole story behind that. But I think that there's a place where we do attract that. There's a law of attraction with things, and where God does it. But I I really wanted to be with somebody that was going to honor my family. We're raised culturally to, they always say, whoever you marry the family. 'Cause, so, like, my husband, when he wanted to court, he actually asked if he could court me. He went to my parents and, may I court your daughter? And he actually, out of all the guys, he was the only one that asked that. So he kind of won the respect with my parents. He did everything in respect to the family. When they get to, so there's always this, like, probably for a couple of months he kept coming around the family, so the family get to know him. My parents were big about uh, staying pure before you get married, to encourage purity before getting married. So I stayed a virgin until I got married. My mom prayed, put anointing oil on us every night and praying that we'd stay pure, because I think some of that was from the Muslim faith too, because she wanted us to, they do the shower and they do all the cleansing kind of things. And so my mother really wanted us to, as women, she wanted us to be good caretakers of the home. We were raised to do that for our husbands and family, but we were also, purity before God was really important growing up. And I remember my mom would say things like, "Now, don't give your heart to so many men, because if you do that, you won't have anything left for your husband." And, you know, um, and so she kind of, you know, I think I had, growing up, this idea about marriage being a beautiful thing, uh, where two people can come together, regardless of their culture, or I think even sometimes culture and values can. There is a beauty when you can see the common things together, and I believe when God is in the center, there's a there is a place that it does prosper when it's lined up right. And I remember somebody, and I'll end with this, but I just remember somebody, when I was in grad school, he used to say, marriage keeps you humble, because it's not always about you. and um, I find that every time we have some my husband's raised Filipino. He was born in Philippines, but then when we came to the States, we both just seemed to click really well, honoring our family. Really, it's easy for us to go and honor our family and get to know each other, even though he wasn't from a different place in Philippines with my parents. So, so kind of like in a nutshell, that's kind of how it's been with our views of marriage. I believe that it's sacred, and I believe that God honors it when we honor Him in marriage, and then everything gets blessed like that.
My father was very well studied, and he had different worldviews. Like, again, we were raised around different cultures and had different friend groups. He was very strict in raising us Christian. So the views he believed is you were supposed to get married one time. It was a one-time thing. You were supposed to wait to have sex until you're married. It's, to me, it's sacred. It's holy. It's not something that you're supposed to, like, I call today's society trial marriages. Like, they get married, oh, that doesn't work, let me try the next one. That didn't work, let me try the next one. I have friends or I won't say friends, coworkers that have been married 4 and 5 times already. Like, they've had marriages and broken up, and I just feel like that's very damaging to people. I think that you should get married once, and you should wait for the right person, and then you fight to make that work. So that's how I feel about marriage. That's how I was raised. My parents were married for 38 years until my father passed away. So that's what I know as far as how marriage should look. And I was also raised that you should wait for the right one. I know there's a lot of people that you can get married to, especially as an attractive person. People are always going to try to approach you, but I think that you should wait for that person that you really want to do life with. And I don't think you should settle and just marry just to be married. I think you should find somebody that you're happy with. So, and I saw my parents have a happy marriage, and they had their ups and downs, but they fought through it and they made it work. So, and the vows were real, to death do us part, because they stayed married until my dad passed away. So that's how I view marriage, and I want the real thing, and I'm not gonna settle for just a trial marriage.